It's a little bit funny that we're going to try and pass this off like it's been 3 days. And if anybody watched 3 days ago, I didn't have a full beard, so that's all right.
Continuity
It's all right.
problems.
We're going to, no one will notice as long as we don't say anything.
Yes.
That's
the key.
The key. We just we'll just play it off.
The Bass Pro Shop, they have Santa Claus that you can come and take pictures with. Same thing as they would have at the mall, but Bass Pro Shop is a popular place for people to do this. And it's funny, I got a picture from my wife how they're doing the Santa Claus pictures this year. And so Santa Claus is on this huge seat, right?
Yeah.
And this big throne, and then like at his about 2 feet in front of him is this big green box, and part of the box is this huge, thick, like 1-inch sheet of like polycarbonate, like plexiglass. And so the children come and sit on this little box that's at like the feet of Santa Claus, and then there's like a wall, like a bulletproof glass wall that separates the children from Santa Claus
Because of the social distancing.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm assuming they probably, hose down the box, spray some.
The kids are going to be scared to open the presents. Like this came from that really sick guy at the mall, didn't it? Or
Yeah, the guy behind
shop.
the shield. Yeah, the guy in that cage.
Wow, that's that's a different way of doing it than I remember.
Yes,
but kids nowadays they have a different they're having a different experience. Social distancing,
and it'll go down in history as like, hey, remember that one year we did everything strange?
I hope
Hopefully.
it goes down in history as the one year we did things strange. I hope this isn't the new thing that happens every couple years.
Yes.
Where it's like, hey, it's pandemic season. Everybody back to your houses. All right. Well, the Proverbs for today is in regards to folly. Folly being foolish or poor life choices. In regards to folly, she sits in her doorway on the heights overlooking the city. She calls out to men going by who are minding their own business. So,
yeah, that's some imagery, right? Like you have, like she's sitting at her doorway at the heights of the city, overlooking the city, right? Like she's probably like, it reminds me of Quasimodo or Batman, up sitting next to a gargoyle, looking down on the city, looking down on you.
And she being poor choices.
Yes.
Foolish decisions. And I would say that's how most of my foolish decisions happen too. I'm minding my own business and then I get this great idea that in hindsight was folly. Well, so that's the proverb. Look out for it. She doesn't care who you are. She's looking for anybody. So we'll try to avoid folly. That's the word of the day. Folly.
Folly.
I love the Norm Macdonald where he says I'm trying to learn a new word. He says, I'm going to learn a new word every day to expand my vocabulary, to make my argument more verisimilitude. And he goes, today's word is expand. I didn't say that right, but it was funny.
I'm gonna trust you on that one.
So give our arguments some more verisimilitude with our vocabulary. Today's word is folly.
What
What
does
is the
verisimilitude mean?
what?
What does verisimilitude mean?
Who knows?
Oh, okay.
It's but you're led to believe that was the word of the day,
Yes.
but it was, but the word of the day was expand. So what's the Romans for today?
So we're going to be looking at Romans 4, chapter 4, verses 1 through 8.
Cool.
And it's about the faith of Abraham. So, and Abraham was, humanly speaking, the founder of the Jewish nation. Mm-hmm. What did he discover about being right with God? If his good deeds had made him acceptable to God, he would have had something to boast about. But that was not God's way. For the scriptures tell us, Abraham believed God, and God counted him as righteous because of his faith. When people work, their wages are not a gift, but something they have earned. But people are counted as righteous, not because of their work, but because of their faith, the faith in God who forgives sinners. David also spoke of this when he described the happiness of those who are declared righteous without working for it. And when David said, "Oh, what joy for those whose disobedience is forgiven, whose sins are put out of sight. Yes, what joy for those whose record the Lord has cleared of sin." And that was Romans 4, 1 through 8.
We picked such an easy to read version that it almost sounded like you were still setting it up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like you're just talking and I'm like, wow, this is a really good setup for the Bible reading, Steve. And then I look down and it's like, oh, you're actually reading it straight up verbatim.
I did notice that.
Yeah, it was good.
Humanly speaking. Yeah. So, so, it's interesting that it says that Abraham, this is before the law. Mm-hmm. This is before, really there was much of any sort of knowing right for wrong. God spoke about the tree initially. Mm-hmm. This is before circumcision. This is before anything with the Jews. But Abraham believed God and he had faith, and it's because of his faith that God counted him as righteous. And that's a really interesting thing, that somehow, in spite of the fact that he had no, we don't know what Abraham would have known about God at that point. Mm-hmm. But we do know that he believed God and he had faith in God.
Yeah, it says that it wasn't because of his works, right? It wasn't because of what he did. It was the fact that he believed God. Well, in one sense, you tend to think, well, if you believe God, it means that you're doing what you're told. But that's sort of the works. So it almost, it almost paints a picture that it's like Abraham believed, I don't know how to even phrase it right. It's almost like he believed in the relationship that he had with God. And it was sort of just because of who he was and that faith that he had, that him and God were friends and had a relationship, that got credited to him.
Yeah.
And I thought, when I read this and I was thinking about it, I thought of sort of, what does it look like to not believe God, right? To go to church, to try to do your best, but not really believe God or have that relationship. I thought it would be kind of like me calling you up. You and I, we talk all the time.
Yeah.
But it would be like if I called you up and I did this. So you pretend like we're not being recorded and that I call you up and this is actually what I say to you, just one-on-one. Just respond like you normally would. There's no tricks. But it's like, ring, ring.
Hello.
Hi, Steve. This
Hey, David.
is Dave Thompson.
Who?
Mr. Liggett, it's really nice to talk to you. I can't believe that you would pick up the phone for me. You're such an incredible, incredible friend.
Yeah.
You're, and you know, the thing is, I'm a terrible friend. I'm the worst. I never do anything. I can't even believe you'd pick up the phone for me.
You're welcome.
So, so Mr. Liggett.
No, Dave.
Mr.
No,
Liggett,
man.
I'm
glad you called.
Oh man, no, don't even say that. I can't. That's ridiculous. I won't hear it. I'm such a worm. Every chance I get to undermine our friendship and just be the worst person, I am always that. And
No, Dave, that's not how you are.
well, Mr. Liggett, if it's not too much trouble, would you mind please talking to me for the next few minutes? I just had a couple of questions. If you weren't too busy, I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
You're playing along. If I was telling you this, if I called you in real life, you would be like,
dude, why are you acting so weird?
What the heck are you doing?
Yeah.
And I think that is a lot of the times how, you know, I will tend to pray, or I'll tend to start out, and I will, you know, get on my hands and knees, and it's like I'm talking to God for the very first time.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, here's the thing. I've done some really bad stuff, and God, you're so awesome. And it's not with the posture of continuing where we left off. It's almost like I want to start over and reintroduce myself.
Or is it that like you don't feel that you have that existing relationship where you can just talk to God in that way?
Right. It's not like it's Abraham, you know, I guess when I imagine this concept of believing God, it's kind of like when I call you. I don't reintroduce myself. I don't call you Mr. Liggett.
Yeah.
You know, it's because there's already a lot of history baked in. And the friendship is sort of already what it is. And there are some things that I could say to you that would be, you know, out of bounds, right? It would be not appropriate. But then there's some things that I would say to you that because we're close, I would say I could easily discuss with you, but I wouldn't just talk about with a stranger on the street.
Yeah.
And so I really got this idea with this idea of Abraham. It wasn't because of what he did necessarily. It's because he believed God and he had this relationship with God. And it's encouraged me to not, I guess, try and do a do-over every time I pray. It's like, you know, we have a thing, and I have to now say, okay, this is what I think I'm supposed to be doing as of yesterday. I'm not going to come back and say, what are my marching orders, you know, already, because I already got, you know, I already heard from God.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a weird kind of a difficult to articulate thought, but that's what I think that it's cool to be able to have that familiarity. Jesus says to call God Abba, which basically is a very familiar term, like dad, right? It's not a It's not the Reverend Mr. Thompson. It's also not irreverent, right? But it's just familiar. It's saying, it's a familiar term.
And in my daily reading, I just read that, and it's interesting that in the context of that verse, it's saying, essentially, if I remember it correctly, it's saying essentially, God sent Jesus to die on the cross for your sins, and like this is a big deal. Like you went from you were doomed, and you were dead, and Christ has brought you in, and now you're alive, and it's through his death on the cross, and now you are adopted children of God, right? Like
Right.
this is cool. This is like cool imagery, right? Like the idea that God is now making you an actual child of his. Like you're now in the kingdom, you're like a prince. And because of that, you can call him Abba.
Right.
And it's like, man, I mean, you start to break that down. You say the creator of the universe went out of his way to come, humble himself, come to the earth, to sacrifice himself to us, us worms, right? Like we're like nothing, but he cared so much about us that he gave, his son. And then it's that act that makes us these adopted children. And it's like, oh my gosh, like that is such a big price to pay. The idea of adopting children is, we see that as a very admirable trait, right? Like if it was just God's going to adopt me, but it would be a big deal. But if it's God is going to sacrifice himself and die, and that's what it takes to adopt me, it's like, man, like there's so much more to it that I don't even think we fully get. So
yeah, I'm sure that's true. What's interesting though is once you kind of can grasp that, then the faith is living in that paradigm.
yeah,
And not going back to God every day saying, I'm a worm, I'm worthless, and at the same time, I don't even know that that's 100% correct, but it seems to me like Abraham embraced this relationship he had with God, and he had an ongoing friendship and communication, and he was obedient. That's obviously a huge part of it, but it was because of that relationship and his faith that everything that he did was counted as righteous. He was given, essentially salvation, as David says, what joy for those whose disobedience is forgiven.
Yeah.
And whose record is clean. It's like, well, if your record's clean, then, you should be able to operate in relationship. And if you have that faith that relationship is there, then you'll be counted as righteous too, right? That's pretty exciting.
Yes. And there's no better person in the entire Bible other than David that gives us an idea of how to talk to God, right? Outside of Jesus.
Yeah, I was going to say Jesus is always the answer to the trivia question on
have you ever heard
who's
the joke?
Best example.
Have you ever heard the joke? There's these little kids, they're in Sunday school, and the teacher goes, all right, kids, what is brown and furry and has a big bushy tail and eats nuts? And the kids are all looking at each other like, And so a brave little kid raises his hand and he goes, I know the answer is Jesus, but it sure sounds like a squirrel to me.
Right.
So,
The answer is always Jesus in the Sunday school.
but David, you know, we have all of Psalms that is like David crying out to God, right?
Right.
And it's such a rich experience in sort of looking at how he is experiencing God. And sometimes, if you ever get a chance to read through a chronological Bible, the you get to see like the challenge that David's actually going through, and then right next to it, you get to read, you know, Psalms that he wrote in that context, and it's interesting to see, right? Like,
Interesting.
and it's like it's really interesting because there's a lot of times where he's just flat out complaining, right? Like,
Yeah.
just, God, like, this is the worst, you know. And you look at Jesus in the Lord's Prayer, right? This, you know, there is an aspect to the Lord's Prayer that is sort of lifting God up, right?
Yeah.
Our Father who art, you know, hallowed be your name,
Right.
right? Like, and but there's a relational component there also, right? And
Yeah.
that's what you're talking about.
Right. So, like, the Lord's Prayer basically starts out with, you know, you're in charge. You know, hallowed be your name is like, yeah, you're the boss, and I'm coming as, you know, the subject. We're not peers in this. You know, we're not going along the road side by side equals.
Yeah.
Right. And then it says, you know, first off, everything that's happening in heaven, I want, you know, just like you're in charge in heaven and everything is, you know, done your way. That's what we want here too. So anything that I'm going to ask comes second. So I'm going to start by saying whatever you want done is what I'm actually wanting. But now I got to eat and, you know, forgive the things I did wrong. And I'm not going to hold anything. I'm going to make sure I forgive everybody else. So then you can please forgive me. And then I got to eat. So today, give me what I need for today, please. And, you know, it's like a sequence.
Yeah.
And it covers, you know, just about everything that you would or could be praying for. It's in one of those buckets.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know that I explained that very well, but
no, I think that makes sense.
I've tried to use that template every time that I pray, meaning start off by saying you're in charge.
Yeah.
Don't let me say something crazy or step out of line. You know, you're God. I'm just the kid. And then here's what I think I've screwed up. And I don't have a grudge against anybody. And then it's like, well, here's what I'm up against too. Here's all the stuff I need to do or I'm trying to accomplish and I need help with.
Yeah.
So that's it.
So are there any mighty men ideas here? Any mighty men concepts that we should go just through our day with?
Yeah, so you brought this up, and I think it's great. And I don't know that we really hammered it down, but the idea of us doing this show is primarily for you and I to be accountable and be, you know, doing this Bible study and sharpening each other.
Yeah.
I think that it's a great opportunity for, you know, the viewer to join in and go, hey, listen, if all the churches are closed and everything's on Zoom meetings anyway, well, come join us. You know, you can hear two guys struggle their way through it, but hopefully encourage each other and really learn how to be closer with God. And you brought this idea of
And I think it's important to add also, like we're not seminary trained pastors, right? Like we are genuinely going through this with the goal of bettering ourselves, right?
Right.
And it's not we're not looking to, necessarily have a theological deep dive. We want to become better men.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that we can have some insight. I hope that we can start a conversation and maybe get some guests or get some callers who can kind of straighten us out. Because that's part of this is working it out, right? Like everything I did on the show today was me trying my hardest to digest what's kind of a complicated concept.
Yeah.
If all you're doing is living your life in between in this world, this is it's the meat and potatoes. And I don't probably have it crystal clear. So I'm going to just talk about it and try and work it out. And then you can be like, no, that doesn't, wrong. or maybe I'll say something and then I hear it out loud and I go, well, it sounded way better in my mind.
Yeah.
But the idea of the mighty men would be something that where the rubber meets the road, where we can report back in where we have stepped up to the plate and actually done something, I guess,
like a tangible thing that we can do in our lives that reflects what we're reading.
Yes.
And
that's more than just reading or praying, but it's actually something that takes a little effort to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, I don't know what that is, but it's something we should think about. Do you have any ideas?
Well, in verse 7, it says, "Oh, what joy for those whose disobedience has been forgiven, whose sins are put out of sight. Yes, what joy for those whose record the Lord has cleared of sin." And I think that this would be a good, I think that Christians are called to, have joy, right? So, like, we should make a concerted effort to be joyful. Like literally rubber meets road. Let's be joyful tomorrow.
But is that something that you can choose?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. See, I thought of joy as more like like laughter. Right?
Well,
you can't make yourself laugh.
Well, I mean,
you can fake it. But you're just being a parrot, right? Like you're not actually laughing. Laughter is kind of involuntary. If you say something that's funny or hear something that's funny, you laugh at it.
Fair enough. So, but here's the idea then. Joy is the natural outflowing of something that would cause joy, right?
Right.
So I guess if you wanted to have like a specific focus, it would be to maybe think about how our disobedience has been forgiven. Our sins have put out of sight. Our record has been cleared of sin.
Yes.
Those are the things that bring joy. So you thinking on those things and
I like it. And this is a very easy Mighty Men challenge to pass because all I have to do is say, yes, I have joy. So there's no I'm not gonna get in trouble for this one. I can do it.
Yeah, there's no.
I can dwell on the fact that I've been forgiven and have a relationship with God. That I can do.
Yeah,
because I'm a mighty man. All right, thanks, Steve. We'll see you tomorrow.
Catch you tomorrow.